And so I started reading as a good boy. After having my Upanayanam ceremony, I started reading a lot. Upanishads, I tried to read the Vedas, I tried to learn a little Sanskrit. Again, I'm just an amateur, but the fact is that I started reading history. And what fascinated me very early is that I started to see the patterns of the links between Sweden and Europe and India in the Indo-European cultures and languages and religions. Praveenji and Suprabhatam, good morning to all of you. I really thank you for your introduction. It's an auspicious day, Ganesh Chaturthi, to be here today with you all. We are all blessed. A few words. I've been asked by Lalit Mishra ji to say a few words about myself and my journey here, and you will have to bear with my ramblings. I would first of all like to begin to thank Lalit Mishra ji and the Indology Foundation for inviting me as the chief guest of this web conference on the grand narrative of Indian civilization. I would also like to thank Professor Dinbandhu Pandey ji, with whom I first interacted, and whose works on the Hindu Shahi dynasty of Afghanistan was actually what inspired me and what brought me in contact with this foundation. So a great thank you to both of you. And I would also like to say that to be on the same platform as a respected and legendary scholar as Dr. B.R. Mani is something I would never have imagined in my life. And I see from the list of participation that we have plenty of doctors and professors in the audience. So I'm quite humble, and you will have to bear with me if I'm not entirely correct, being an amateur in this field. So what is a serving Swedish diplomat doing in an event like this? Well, I will share with you a little of my personal journey, and then we can come back to the topic. I can't lay any claim to any formal academic credentials in Indology. I studied for 1 year at the Stockholm University, Indian history, little Sanskrit, little Nepal, but I'm a dilettante, and my training is in business and economics, as was said by Mr. Praveen Mishra. So I was, and I hope I'm audible. Can you just confirm that I'm speaking at the right level? So I can't lay claim to any formal academic credentials in this important field, but by birth and by inclination, or you can say even passion, Indology has always been with me. I have a deep connection with this field. And in fact, if you look at whatever I have done outside my work, apart from community work, it is really Indology which has been my one abiding love in life. So this comes partly from my family background. I don't know how many of you have seen this book. I'll show it to you. I hope you can see it. But this is the Cultural Heritage of India, 6 volumes by Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. It was published in the 50s. So my grandfather, Haridas Bhattacharya, was a professor and the editor of that volume. So I grew up with these books in my house. And my grandfather, whom I unfortunately could not see, he passed away in 1956, long before I was born. He was an erudite scholar, a professor, and also an Orthodox Pandit from West Bengal, from a Vedic family. So in my house, I grew up with these values of Indology very much present. My grandfather was active at the Department of Philosophy at BHU and the universities of Dhaka and Calcutta during the first half of the 20th century. So with that as my guru and my inspiration, although absent guru, I grew up in Sweden, a Bengali Brahmin boy growing up in a cold and dark and remote corner compared to India, far removed from India. I instinctively started grasping at common roots. If you grow up in a country far, far away from your ancestral culture, you naturally try to find the common ground. What is the common ground between Sweden and India? And in my days now, we have a population of over 1 crore people, and of those, about a fifth are immigrants like me. But when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, there were very few immigrants in Sweden. So naturally, as you might know, for people who grow up when they are in a small minority, you search for your roots. You start looking for your identity. Who am I? why am I here? What am I doing here? And so I started reading as a good boy. After having my Upanayanam ceremony, I started reading a lot. Upanishads, I tried to read the Vedas, I tried to learn a little Sanskrit. Again, I'm just an amateur, but the fact is that I started reading history. And what fascinated me very early is that I started to see the patterns of the links between Sweden and Europe and India in the Indo-European cultures and languages and religions. Your Max Muller's and all the discoveries of the 18th and 19th century became a very fascination with me. From Iceland to Iran to the borders of Bharat, I started exploring these cultures by reading and reading. And when you go through the treasure troves of Celtic, Slavic, Germanic, Roman, Greek, Armenian, Iranian, Central Asian lore, you feel that this beautiful mosaic of commonalities between our cultures that emerge. And even in my hometown in Sweden, I remember just outside the town, there was a huge Viking monument with stones and grave mounds. And I used to go there, and I used to read the rune stones and touch the stones, and I used to go there and meditate. And I brought my Swedish friends also. And this link between India and Europe, between my ancestral culture and my adopted culture, has been so important to me in building my own identity and understanding history and my own background. So whether you read the epics of the Icelandic Edda, I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, the Gaelic Celtic cycles, the Iliad and Odyssey of Homer, or Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, they feel as close to ourselves as Ramayana and Mahabharata. These epics bind us together. So again, these are fascinating sort of elements that really have helped me in my life to build my own personality. So we'll come more to today's topics by Dr. Mani and Shri Lalit Mishra. But I'd just like to say that this area, which was once contiguous and unbroken, the Indo-European cultural sphere, which ranged from Iceland all the way to Central Asia, to Turpan and Dunhuang, I think this whole Silk Route, the cultures were extremely complex and fantastically rich, layer upon layer upon layer. But they were irretrievably broken, as you know. Christianity extinguished the pagan religions of Europe, and the irresistible wave of Islam washed away Sasanian, Zoroastrian Iran, and the complex cultures of Central Asia. And this brings us also then to the fascinating question of India's borderlands, which is another passion of mine. And I mentioned at the beginning that Professor Dinbandhu Pandey's writings had really fired me up. And you remember the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed in 2001, a very sad moment in history. I'm sure you all witnessed it and felt the pain. And it represented to me not so much an act of Taliban cultural vandalism, but it represented to me the final loss, or the final nail in the coffin, the final loss of lands that were once unquestionably Indian. And you may recall that the great Chinese traveler, Huan Tsang, mentions that the city of Nagarahara, or today's Jalalabad, was once the gateway to India. The Hindu Shahis, the dynasty I mentioned, the last Hindu dynasty on the throne of Kabul. And Kabul was lost only towards the end of the 10th century. You may be familiar with what is now called Nuristan, the province in Afghanistan, which was until 1896 known as Kafiristan or Peristan, ancient Kapisa. And there lived the Proto-Vedic Aryan tribes, still unconverted, a living memory of that the fact that eastern and southern part of Afghanistan were part and parcel of the Indian civilization. Now, this fact is lost, maybe not to you, experts in your fields and well wandered in the annals of Indian history, but to most modern Indians, let alone the rest of the world, these borderlands and these ancient links are very, very, I would say, very unknown or not really given any pride of place or importance. It's obvious that in Pakistan, studies in this era and this epoch is not really promoted by the ruling classes. It really doesn't fit into the narrative. Afghanistan has been caught up in civil war, of course, and a lot of the heritage has been destroyed. Iran is still under quite a harsh regime, which does not promote any inquiries in the pre-Islamic past. So, having lived in India for almost a decade now, in two different periods, I'm struck myself, and you may correct me on this, the relative lack of awareness in modern day India of these lost lands of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. There is so much heritage and so much of India's clues to India's civilization in this, as well as the Indo-European links, of which Sri Lalit Mishra will speak on the Celts. And I feel and I hope that the Indological Foundation will be instrumental in bringing out more of these stories to the public. And I really have to congratulate the foundation for taking the initiative and doing all this, because I think these are stories that are really needed. They need to be heard in today's India. And not, I have to repeat, as revanchism, as to instill a feeling of aggression or vengeance, but just the fact that these are important areas, these are important epochs of our history, and even for the youth of today, or tomorrow's Afghanistan, tomorrow's Iran, if India does not, and tomorrow's Pakistan, in 2 generations or 3 generations, they will ask their ancestors, why did you not preserve any traces of the past? They will look to India for that. So I think India has a special role as a guardian of the history and culture of these ancient lands. So therefore, I really am happy with today's topics, and I really look forward to listening to the 2 speakers. I think that things can improve. India, I've seen myself during my long career in the Swedish Foreign Ministry, almost 20 years now. I've seen how India's role in the world has increased, and how India's standing has steadily, slowly but steadily, been raised in the Committee of Nations. India is now seen as an important player in the world. Most countries, including my own country, store a lot of importance and have placed India, among the top 3 priority nations. With the rise of India and the rise of India's economy and resources, I think that it's important that Indology and the humanities in India also get the attention that they deserve. Today, at the center of gravity in Indology, the resources are all concentrated in the West, in the great US universities, in some of the Western universities. Unfortunately, not Sweden, where the last chair of Indology was actually removed a couple of years back. So we have a lot to do in Sweden as well. But I think, unfortunately, that's the story in many of the European countries, that Indological chairs and departments have been cut and slashed. So definitely US and UK, Germany are still the center of gravity. And I really hope, and I would like to participate in this effort to create momentum for more resources for Indology in India. And India should be the center of gravity for Indology. So I think that with the rise of modern India, this will happen in 10, 20 years. I'm pretty sure that the universities of India will get larger endowments, and young Indians will also feel that it is worthwhile to pursue a career in this field and flock to this field. I myself, I'm probably a very mediocre economist. I should have gone in for history or archaeology or something like that, maybe next life. But I do hope that modern young Indians will try to pursue this field. So, having said this, I don't want to take too much time. I'd rather have a question and answer session later on. I would like to just again underline that I'm extremely happy to be part of this endeavor. I will do my very best to contribute, especially in Europe, and assist Dr. Mahapatra to find more links and to find more academics in the West. The time has come for such a foundation, and you are all feel free to contact me for any reason. I'll share my details also with Shri Mishra has my details. And I think that without taking too much time, we're all very eager to hear the legend Dr. B.R. Mani and later Shri Mishra speak on the respective topics and impart their wisdom to us. And I really thank you all for taking the patience and for having me as the chief guest today. Thank you.